On this edition of Practical Probate, I'm going to talk about what happens when there's allegations of assets missing from the estate of someone who passed away in the probate court. I'm Dom Calabrese. Since 1995, I've been a Connecticut attorney, and since 2003, I've been a Connecticut probate judge. I developed Practical Probate as a series of presentations and articles that are designed to give people information to make it less likely that they'll be taken advantage of by unscrupulous purveyors of estate planning and probate products. This presentation is for informational purposes only. It's not intended to be and should not be relied upon as legal advice. For legal advice regarding your own situation, you should consult with a qualified attorney. In the probate court, when someone passes away, there's a process that has to be followed. One part of that process is for the person who is appointed executor under a will or administrator if there is no will, is for that person to inventory the assets, the probate assets of the deceased person, and bring them before the probate court so that all the interested parties have an opportunity to see exactly what they are and see if anything might be missing from them. Now, it's important to understand when someone passes away and there's probate proceedings, the only property or assets of that deceased person that are subject to those probate proceedings are assets that the deceased person owned only in their name when they passed away. So if they transferred something to another person before they passed away, that property is no longer part of their probate estate. Actually, it was never part of the probate estate because they transferred it while they were alive. And people, while they're alive, can make all kinds of transfers. They could make transfers that are gifts to other people. They could transfer property from in their own name to survivorship with another person or persons. They can name someone a beneficiary of an asset. That's very common in things like retirement accounts and life insurance policies. It's also possible in accounts in financial institutions, and that's usually manifested by a designation that's either transfer on death or payable on death. So any assets, any property of the deceased person that falls into one of those categories is not going to be under the control of the probate court. Another area that's frequently questioned in the probate court are family members or beneficiaries who had some idea that there was an asset or maybe even cash that the deceased person owned at some point before they died, and now no one can find it. In my experience on the bench, oftentimes this is a situation where there was just a very informal remark made to the person bringing this up with no concrete proof that that asset ever even existed. Another area that I'm seeing more issues around in the probate court are people who serve as a fiduciary, for example, an agent under a power of attorney. And especially for people who pass away after a long period of incapacity, someone, a member of their family, might act as an agent under their power of attorney to help manage their financial affairs. And I see more frequently in the last 3 or 4 years on the bench that there's more and more questions raised about what the dealings were of that agent under the power of attorney in the time before the deceased person passes away. And in that situation, it's possible for a petition to be brought before the probate court to make the agent under the power of attorney account for what they did with those assets. But I have to say, in my years on the bench, many of these questions are legitimately raised, but at the end of the day, what's more typical, what I usually find after all the evidence is presented, is that the deceased person spent the money on maybe medical care or household expenses, for example, which can be very significant. So there's a lot of different things that could have happened with those once solely owned assets that the decedent had at some point before they passed away, but at the point of death, they no longer owned. So it's important to understand the universe of possibilities with assets of a deceased person in the time leading up to their death. Thank you.